What's up guys, it's Dennis. In today's video, we're going to be chatting about the differences between an FSA and an HSA. In the world of personal finance and benefits and deciding what's right for you, it's really important to know what supplemental accounts can do for you and your personal finances. This can ultimately impact what kind of health insurance plan you decide to go with, and it can actually even impact your retirement. Both FSA and HSA accounts can be tax advantageous, so definitely pay close attention to this video. By the end of this video, you're going to have a solid understanding as to the difference between an FSA and an HSA, and you'll be able to make a decision as to which is right for you. Before we dive in, I have one quick favor to ask, and that's please can you guys just smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and while you're at it, you can destroy the subscribe button and the notification bell. It really helps out the channel, and I really would appreciate each and every little like that I get. Alright, so let's dive in. A flexible spending account, or an FSA, is a tax-advantaged account that you can use for medical expenses. What's interesting about an FSA is that it's actually established by your employer. So your employer acts as the administrator for the FSA, and you're able to make claims against that FSA. The account can be used by either yourself, your spouse, or your dependents. Now, one of the great advantages of an FSA account over something like an HSA account is that the funds are available immediately based on what you decide to contribute annually. So as an example, if I want to contribute $200 every month to my FSA, for the year, I would have accrued $2,400. Now, if I have some medical expenses on January 15th, my FSA can kick in, but I can claim an expense against the entire $2,400 in January, even though I've only contributed $200 at that point in time. Speaking about money, the annual amount you can elect to contribute to an FSA is $2,850 for 2022. Now, because FSAs are established by your employer, if you decide to switch jobs, and we all know that's happening quite a lot right now, #great resignation, you will lose any benefits in your FSA. The account is structured as a lose it or lose it type account. So the idea is that you actually want to spend in your FSA to try get up to however much you contribute on an annual basis. Speaking of which, if you don't make it in time and the whole calendar year goes by and you're sitting there at the end of December and you have no other expenses left to claim, there's actually a grace period of 2.5 months for you to still claim medical expenses that can be used for the previous tax year. Now, some funds in the FSA do roll over, however, it's about $500 a year. So if you're sitting with a $2,000 balance in your FSA, you're gonna wanna spend it before the year is over so that you can actually get a little bit of value. All right, so moving on to a health savings account or an HSA. An HSA is more like a bank account that belongs to you. Any amount that you contribute to the HSA is money that you can see and you can withdraw, just like a bank account. In order to open up an FSA, you have to meet the following 3 conditions. Number 1, you cannot be claimed as a dependent on anyone else's tax return. Number 2, you cannot be enrolled in Medicare. Lastly, you have to be enrolled in what's called a high deductible health plan, or HDHP for short. All right, so it might sound like a lot actually goes into qualifying. However, it's a lot simpler than what you think it is. Most employers offer an HSA option on their high deductible plans. So normally you can just set one up through work. An advantage of HSA accounts is that they are triple tax advantaged. I've explained this in a huge amount of detail in another video. I'll put the link at the top of the screen, but these accounts are top notch when it comes to tax planning. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, HSAs are your account, so they stay in your name. So if you do want to switch employers, no worries, that HSA will go with you to your next employer. Another thing you can do with an HSA is invest the funds. So in other words, you can put the money into a broad index like the S&P 500 and actually track the market and earn returns just like a retirement account. So how do you choose which account is actually right for you? Well, chances are at the time that you're watching this video, it might not be opportune. In other words, you're not in open enrollments. Most employers only allow you to switch plans once during the year unless there is a qualifying life event, like you may get married or there could be a new child born in the family, whatever the case is. But generally, you want to know which option you want to choose going into open enrollments. Depending on your medical and financial situation, you may want to ask yourself the following questions before deciding if an HSA is right for you. The first question is, does your employer even offer an HSA. Some employers don't actually offer a high deductible health plan, so this may not even be an option for you. So you may need to just check with your HR department as to whether you can switch to an HSA. Another question might be how much you actually plan to spend in medical expenses in the next year. Also, the timing of this expense makes quite a big difference because depending on where in the year we are, you may prefer an HSA or an FSA. As I mentioned earlier, an FSA allows you to tap into the entire value of your annual benefit earlier on. So if you're expecting really big medical procedures in January, it might be a good idea to do an FSA instead of an HSA, as you won't have sufficient money accrued by that point in time to cover the costs. Another consideration is whether you need the account to be portable. Are you maybe planning on changing employers anytime soon? That's a really big consideration because you don't want to contribute to an FSA and then lose all that money that you've contributed. Another consideration, which I personally find really important, is whether you plan to invest the money. Now, an FSA doesn't let you invest the money, whereas an HSA does. So depending on what you're doing in your personal finances, it may motivate you to change to a different account. Once you've answered these few basic questions, you'll have a pretty good idea as to which account is right for you. So this begs the question, well, I see both of these accounts, why can't I just have both? And it turns out you can't have both accounts at the same time, or at least not the full value of both accounts. I had an FSA previously before I moved over to an HSA, and I had some money left in the FSA. Now, what did happen is some of that money did roll over and continues to roll over. However, what you can use that money for is actually limited. You can only use the money in your FSA for certain medical expenses if you have an HSA. Now, those medical expenses are optometry, so if you need to get your eyes checked, or whether you need to go to the dentist or have any orthodontics done. Those are really the only two expenses that an FSA will cover if you have an HSA at the same time. So you may want to consider that before you end up switching. Both of these accounts definitely have pros and cons, and I personally have an HSA for the reasons I mentioned above, but you need to do some thinking about what's right for you. Now, I spoke a little bit about an HSA and like how I use it personally, and I made a video just about this. So click the video in the link over here, and it'll teach you all about how I use an HSA to save for retirement. So which account are you leaning towards? An FSA or an HSA? I'd love to get your thoughts in the comments. Leave a comment down below and tell me which one you're thinking about choosing. Thanks for watching today's video. If you made it to the end, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe if you ended up learning something new. If you didn't, I'd still appreciate a like and subscribe because it really does help the channel. Lastly, you can find me on Instagram. I'll leave my handle down below, and I hope you guys have an awesome rest of the day.